Okay, so in this lesson we're going to look at factoring trinomials of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. And in this case, the coefficient of x squared, which is called the leading coefficient, so remember the leading coefficient, so we're going to use that word, so the leading coefficient. So the leading coefficient in these problems will not be 1. So in the previous lesson, the leading coefficient was 1. So in this case, it's not 1. And then we're going to do this by trial and error, and then sometimes referred to as reverse FOIL. But that's the way we're going to do this. Now, there's another way you can do this using the AC method, but that's going to be another lesson. So in these problems, we're going to use trial and error on these polynomials, and these polynomials are trinomials. So they're going to have 3 terms, and the largest exponent will be 2. Okay, so let's look at this example. Number 1. So we want to factor 7x squared plus 10x plus 3. And so it usually helps, for the most part, it helps if you write your polynomial in descending order. So descending order. And so what that means is that the largest exponent is listed first, and then your constant is listed last. Okay? So again, descending order is usually the best way to rewrite your polynomial. So in this case, it is in descending order, so we're good to go with this. So you have your x squared term, you have your x term in the middle, and you have your constant term at the end, which is the last term. Okay, so as we factor this, just like we did in the previous lesson, the first thing you always want to do is check to see if the GCF is other than 1. So if you look at every term, those 3 terms, what is the GCF? So if you look at that, you'll notice that GCF is 1, right? Okay, so the GCF is 1. So then what we're going to do next is we're going to try to factor this. We're going to try and factor this as 2 binomials, just like this. And remember, this is trial and error, reverse FOIL. So if something doesn't work, we'll try something else. Okay? Now, the way you want to do this is this way. So you're going to look at f first. So in the idea of that FOIL, you can look at f. Now remember, when you FOIL 2 binomials, f is the first term of each binomial. That's your f. So remember, this right here is f. So that's the first term of each binomial, and you multiply that out. Okay. All right. Now, so when you multiply that out, that's going to give you your first term here. So here's the question: what are the possibilities for these two terms here when multiplied together to give you 7x squared? So notice that 7 is prime. So always think like this. Well, 7 is a prime number, so there's only one way to get a product of 7, and that's 7 times 1. So the factors of 7 are 7 and 1. That's the only possibility. So that makes number 1 an easy problem, because that's prime. And in fact, if you look at the last, that's prime as well. So it makes things a lot easier for us when you're dealing with prime numbers. But not all of them are prime numbers. All right, so your leading coefficient and your constant are not always going to be prime numbers. But if at least one of them is, it makes things a lot easier for us. So let's look at the first. So what times what term times what term will give me 7x squared? Well, the only possibility is 7x and x. So I'll have it written, and always check as you go through the process. 7x times x is 7x squared. So far, I'm good with my f. Now, once you find your f, once you find what goes here, then you go to your last, the last. Now, remember, the last refers to the last terms of each binomial. That's what the last refers to. Okay, so this right here, you're going to get by multiplying these 2 terms here, the last terms of each binomial. L times L will give you that. Okay? All right, so look at this. This is 3. All right, this is 3. Now, let's not worry about the sign for right now, because in a little while we're going to look at negative as well. But this is positive. Let's just look at 3 for right now. So there's only one possibility for 3, since 3 is prime, and that's 3 and 1. All right, now listen carefully. I am going to put the 3 here and the 1 there. So that's trial and error. So put it somewhere. Put it either here or here. Put the 3 here or the 1 here. Put the 3 here or the 1 here. Does not matter because you're going to check as you go along using trial and error. Okay? Now remember the whole idea, remember factoring means to write this trinomial as a product of factors. That's what that means. So factoring, you're going to write this as a product of factors. So some factor times some factor. And that's what we're trying to do. Okay, so now let's look at the sign. So you see that last sign's positive. So you think of all your experience with multiplying binomials. The only way you can get the last sign to be positive is if these signs here are the same. So for example, they're both negative. A negative 1 times a negative 3. Remember, L times L. So the last term times the last term. A negative 1 times a negative 3 is a positive 3. Y'all agree? But here's the thing. When you do the outer and the inner, because you got to look at that also, when you do the outer and the outer is negative and the inner is negative. So that means that when you add a negative and a negative, when you add now, a negative plus another negative is a negative, but your middle sign's positive. Okay? So here's the trick with determining the signs. If the last sign's positive, that's the easy kind. Because that means that these signs are going to be the same, and the sign will be whatever that middle sign is. So since that middle sign, that middle term is positive, that means these are going to be positive. Okay, so that's how you determine the signs. And so as we go through this, we're going to discuss that sign. How do we determine the signs? Okay, now remember, so I have 7x times x is 7x squared, so that's good so far, right? Then let's go to the L. 1 times 3 is 3, so far we're good. Now let's do the outer and the inner. Okay, so look, the outer is 21x. The inner is x. When I add them up, I get 22x. Is that what I wanted? No. Okay, so that did not work. So that's trial and error. Now, as you go through your experiences, you're going to be able to do this pretty quickly. All right, so I went ahead and I made a mistake. I didn't put the terms in the right order just to show you what's going to happen. So then you're going to say, all right, so that didn't work. So what's the other possibility? Well, let's switch them. Switch the 3 and the 1. See if that works. All right, so let's do that. So we're going to switch the 3 and the 1. So 7x and x will stay the same in the same place. And I'm going to put 3 here, 1 here. The last sign's positive. That means that these signs in here are going to be the same, and it's going to be that middle sign. So they're both going to be positive. All right. Now let's check the F and the L just to make sure we're okay so far. So that's what you got to do. All right. So factoring is easy to check. It is easy to check. So you should never get your answer incorrect because you can easily check your work. 7x times x is 7x squared. So we're good, right? So that's still a check here. 3 times 1 is 3. So we're good. That's still a check here. Now the only thing, remember, so we have the 7x squared and the 3 good. Now we got to check the 10x since that's the outer and the inner. So the outer, look at what I'm doing. The outer, 7x times 1 is 7x. The inner, 3 times x is 3x. And when I add them up, I get 10x, which is what I wanted. So this is correct. All right, so that's correct. Now just always make sure though, always make sure you go back to your factors. How many factors do you see? There are 2 factors. Here's my first one, 7x plus 3. Here's my second one, x plus 1. Always go back and verify that the GCF of each factor is 1. Okay, you must make sure you do that. So 7x plus 3, the GCF is 1. X plus 1, the GCF of those 2 terms is 1. So we're good. So that's the answer. And so notice what you do. So that's how you're going to factor these trinomials using trial and error or reverse FOIL. Okay? All right, so let's look at another, number 2. So number 2, let's suppose we have 3x squared plus, let's do a y, 3y squared, because it's not always going to be x's. You can have different variables. So 3y squared plus 19y plus 6. All right? So this is kind of an easy kind because notice the coefficient here, my leading coefficient is prime. That's 3, so that's a prime number. Now 6 is not prime. 6 is composite, but it's still a small number to deal with. Okay. The other thing that makes this easy is the fact that all these signs are positive. That's the other thing that makes it easy. Okay. All right. So here we go. So first of all, what's the GCF? Because if you have a GCF that's other than 1, you got to factor it out, right? Okay. So the GCF here is 1. Y'all agree? GCF is 1. And so now I'm going to go directly to the two binomials. All right. So we're gonna factor this as two binomials. Okay. Now remember, FOIL, F-O-I-L. So we got to do the F first. All right. So remember, you want two factors whose product is 3y squared, and that's going to go here. So there's only one possibility, 3y and y, and it does not matter. Let me remind you, it does not matter if you put y first and 3y second. It does not matter, because remember, multiplication is commutative. So when we go back here, someone else could have wrote the answer as x plus 1 times 7x plus 3. That's the other way. Because remember, multiplication is commutative. The order in which you multiply does not matter. Remember, 3 times 6 is the same as 6 times 3. Okay? So 7x plus 3 times x plus 1 is the same as x plus 1 times 7x plus 3. Okay? So it does not matter whether you put the 3x in the first parentheses, 3y in the first parentheses, or 3y in the second parentheses. Does not matter. Now let's look at 6. Okay, so here's where you're going to start thinking. All right, so what are the possibilities for 6? So let's think. So in your mind, you're looking at two factors whose product is 6. So this select 6 times 1, 3 times 2, right? Okay. And just to remind you, I could have said negative 6 times a negative 1, couldn't I? Isn't that a positive 6? I could have said negative 3 times a negative 2, couldn't I? Isn't that a positive 6? So that's what you're thinking about. You're thinking about, well, because remember, you got to fill out that last term. So the last term will come from your L right here, and that's 6. So the thing that makes it easy here is the fact that that last sign is positive. Always look for that. If that last sign is positive, that's going to be easy to deal with. Last sign positive, easy, because that means that these signs in here, these signs you put here have to be the same, and they're going to be that middle sign. So that means that I'm going to have 3y plus and y plus. Okay? So I definitely know that my possibilities for 3y squared has to be this. There is no other choice, because 3 is prime. The factors of 3 are 3 and 1. Okay, so let's try 6. So I know that I can eliminate these because those are negative factors. All right, so either I'm going to say 6 times 1 or 3 times 2, right? Okay, now listen carefully to this. Which one, and this doesn't always work, but what you want to try first are the factors that are closer together on the number line. Doesn't always work, but that is usually my approach. Let's try the factors that are close together in the number line. Not always true, okay? But let's try that first. So I'm going to choose 3 and 2. Now listen carefully to what I'm about to say, and that's important. So remember, the GCF is 1, right? GCF is 1. So if I say 3 times 2 is 6, and I put the 3 here and the 2 here, I know right away, before I even check, I know right away that cannot be. That cannot be, because if you look at this factor here, right here, if you look at this right here, what is the GCF of this factor, of these two terms? The GCF of these two terms is 3. That means I could have factored out a 3. That means that this is 3 times y plus 1. You'll agree? Which means this now, which means that the GCF here, that means that if this is the case, then all of these are divisible by 3. And is that true? 19 is not divisible by 3. So no, so that cannot be it. So here's the thing you got to remember, and that's going to help you quite a bit to do these quickly. Whenever you're putting your terms in here, your factors that would give you either the first or the last, always remember what the GCF is. The GCF is 1, so that means that if I put a 3 here, that means I could factor out a 3, which means that all of these are divisible by 3. And then that's no longer, and that would say that the GCF would not be 1, which we know it is 1. So we know I cannot put 3 here, okay? So that means that I cannot put the 3 here. So that means then that possibly what would then work would be to put the 3 here and the 2 here. Okay, and remember these are still plus symbols here because the last sign's positive. A positive 2 times a positive 3 is a positive 6. So remember you're checking as you go along. None of you should get any of this incorrect because you're just using reverse FOIL, using the idea of FOIL to get to this trinomial. So far my F is good, my L is good. Now I got to do the outer and the inner. Remember the outer and inner will give you this middle term. So let's check it. What's the outer? So the outer 3y times 3 is 9y, right? That's the outer. What's the inner? 2y. When I add them up, I get 11y. Is that what I wanted? Nope, that is not what you wanted. Okay, so then see the trial and error? Now again, as you go through this, as you do more and more problems, you're going to get pretty quickly at this. You'll be able to tell right away what's going to work. So I know that 3 times 2 isn't going to work. So let's try 6 and 1. So let's try 6 and 1. All right, so I have 3y and y, right? Now again, we're trying 6 and 1. So here's my question to you. Are you going to put a, and remember this is still plus plus, y, 3y plus 2, and then y plus. Are you going to put the 6 here? No, you're not going to put the 6 here for the same reason that if you put the 6 here, that means that I can factor out a 3, which means that the GCF is not going to be 1, which it is 1. All right, because 19 is not divisible by 3, so 6 cannot go there. So that means then that I got to put a 6 here. So let's do that. So I get 3y, y, and then 6 and 1, and then plus plus. All right, so let's check. Again, check as you go. Check as you go. 3y times y is 3y squared. So we're good with that. So I'm good with my F. Let's look at the last. Positive 1 times a positive 6 is a positive 6. So I'm good with my L. Let's do the outer and the inner. The outer is 18y because 3y times 6 is 18y. And the inner is 1 times y, which is y. And when I add them up, look what you get. You get 19y, which is what you wanted. So my answer will be 3y plus 1 times y plus 6. Or if you want to, someone else could have said y plus 6 times 3y plus 1. Okay? All right, so that was number 2. So let's do number 3. So this is trial and error. And again, notice that I see how I tried something didn't work, I tried something didn't work. The more you do, the better you get at determining very quickly what your factors are. All right, so number 3. Number 3, let's suppose we had this now. Let's suppose we had, all right, so it's number 3. All right, let's suppose we had 3x squared minus 8c minus 3. So 3x squared minus 8c minus 3. Okay, so notice that the leading coefficient's prime, and the that last term, now the last term is negative 3, but the absolute value of that's 3, and 3 is prime. So those two things are prime, so that's going to make this a little bit easier to deal with. It's always nice to have prime numbers here. Notice also that the GCF is 1. The GCF of this polynomial, this trinomial, is 1. So I'm going to go directly to the two binomials. All right, now, remember in our previous problem, the last sign was positive. So that means that these signs in here were the same, and it will be this middle sign. Here, though, the last sign's negative. So we're going to have to be a little bit more careful with our signs here. Okay? but it's still easy to deal with. So remember FOIL, F-O-I-L. So always write this down so you can go through the thought processes. So the first thing you're going to do is figure out what F needs to be. So what two terms multiplied together, what two factors multiplied together is 3x squared? Well, there's only one possibility because 3 is prime. So that's 3x and x. Okay? All right, now, for right now, let's look at the absolute value of the last. So far my F is okay. Now let's look at L. So the absolute value of negative 3 is 3. So let's think about 3 for right now. So there's only two factors whose product is 3 and 1. Now remember, you know right away that I cannot put 3 here, because if you put 3 here, then that means you can factor out a 3, right? So again, if you put 3 here, I'll put it in pencil so I can erase. If you put 3 here, then that means you can factor out a 3, which means that all these are divisible by 3, and it's not, because 8's not divisible by 3. So I know, I'm going to erase it now, I know that 3 needs to go here, and 1 needs to go here, okay? All right, now here's the other thing you got to think. My last sign's negative. Remember when you did the distributive property, when you foiled, and you did the last times last gave you this term. Well, remember this product's supposed to be negative, right? The only way you can get a negative product is if one is positive, and I'm going to go ahead and make this one positive, and the other one's negative. Okay. All right. Now, remember, don't say that's your answer. You have to go through this foiling process to check. There's no reason why anyone should ever get any of this incorrect, because it's easy to check using FOIL. Okay, so let's check this. So my F is okay. So 3x times x is 3x squared, so I'm good. Now let's go to the L. Negative 1 times positive 3 is a negative 3, so far I'm okay. Now let's do the outer and the inner. Okay? The outer, 3x times 3 is 9x. The inner, negative 1 times x is negative x. And I forgot, I'm sorry, this is supposed to be x right here. All right, so your variables have to be the same. Okay, so that's supposed to be x. All right, so negative x. And then when I add them up, what's a negative x and a positive 9x? Well, 8x. But what did you want? You wanted a negative 8x. All right, so you're like, well, what do I do now? Hey, you see how those are opposites? You had 8x, you want a negative 8x, so all that means is you just change the signs. Change the signs of the, change the middle signs, the signs of the last terms of each binomial. So that did not work, so I'm going to cross that one out, and then what I just found out now is that instead of it being 3x minus 1, it's going to be 3x plus 1, and instead of it being x plus 3, it will be x minus 3. Now again, always check your answer. FOIL. 3x times x is 3x squared. Now let's go to the L. A positive 1 times a negative 3 is a negative 3. Now let's do the outer and inner. So I'm actually going to write it out, the outer. The outer is negative 9x. The inner is 1x. And when I add them up, I get negative 8x, which is what I wanted. And so the answer is 3x plus 1 times x minus 3. Or, remember, multiplication is commutative. Someone else could have said x minus 3 times 3x plus 1. Okay? All right, number 4. Number 4, let's suppose we had this. We had 3x squared plus 7x minus 6. So 3x squared plus 7x minus 6. Okay. So again, make sure it's in descending order, right? So it is in descending order. So my largest exponent is listed first. My constant's listed last. Then find the GCF, because remember, if the GCF is other than 1, you're going to factor it out. So the GCF of those three terms is 1. So the GCF is 1. So once I know the GCF is 1, I'm going to try and factor this as 2 binomials. Try factoring as 2 binomials. Okay, so again, the leading coefficient is prime. And whenever it's prime, that's the easy kind, whenever it's prime. Now, the absolute value of negative 6 is 6, and 6 is not a prime number, but I can deal with it, I think. Okay? So let's do FOIL. F-O-I-L. Okay, so the only possibility for 3x squared is if this is 3x and this is x. Okay? So that takes care of the f. Now look at negative 6. The possibilities for 6 is 6 and 1, so those are the factors. 6 times 1 is 6, or 3 and 2, right? And remember, this is negative, so obviously one's going to be positive, the other's going to be negative. All right, but those are the only possibilities. And so if I use, and again, I'm going to go back to 3 and 2. So now you could have started with 6 and 1. Does not matter, guys. It does not matter. But I'm going to go with 3 and 2 for right now. So if I choose 3 and 2, am I going to put 3 here? No, for the same reason we had a discussion earlier. If you put 3 here, then that means you can factor out a 3, which means that the GCF is not 1, because all of these are divisible by 3. So that means I cannot put the 3 there. So that means I got to put 2 here and then 3 here. Now let's talk about the sign. So 1, remember the sign's negative 6, right? So the only way you can get L to be negative 6 is if the signs in here are different. Signs in here are different. So just make one positive, one negative, and then check it. If it doesn't work, you'll try something else. Hence the idea of trial and error. So let's go ahead. I'm going to just make it wrong for right now and just show you what your thought process will be. So let's go ahead and make this negative and this positive. See what happens. Okay? So I'm going to go back to this now. 3x times x is 3x squared. The last. Positive 2 times negative 3 is a negative 6. So far we're good. Now let's do the outer inner. So here's the outer. The outer is 3x times negative 3 is negative 9x. The inner, 2 times x is 2x. And when I add 2x and a negative 9x, I get negative 7x. But that's not what I wanted. But this and this are opposites. So since those are opposites, what does that mean? What does that mean that you do to get your right answer, to get the correct factors? All that means is that you just change the signs. So this is not going to work, so I'm going to cross that out. So then I'm almost there. So then I'm going to say the answer, instead of saying 3x plus 2, you're going to say 3x minus 2. And instead of the factor being x minus 3, it'll be x plus 3. Now again, always before, even though you know this is correct, always check again. F, 3x times x, 3x squared. L, negative 2 times positive 3 is negative 6. Now let's do the outer inner. The outer, 3x times 9 is 9x. The inner, negative 2 times x is negative 2x. When I add them up, I get 7x, which is what you wanted. So there's your answer. So the answer will be 3x minus 2 times x plus 3. Or again, multiplication is commutative, so your factors could then also be x plus 3 times 3x minus 2. Okay? So notice the thought process as you go through. Number 5. So let's do number 5. So let's suppose in number 5, I had this problem, number 5. All right, so number 5, let's suppose, I'll go ahead and write this here. Let's suppose number 5, we have 4z. Let's stop using x for right now, because I don't want you to think that the variable is always going to be x. So 4z, that's a z, squared minus 28z plus 49. Okay? So 4z squared minus 28z plus 49. Okay, so now we're getting to a situation where the leading coefficient is not prime and the last term is not prime. All right, so then we're gonna remember how we here did several possibilities. So it is conceivable, since these are not prime, it is conceivable for us to go through multiple trial and errors. All right, but make things easy yourself. No big deal. You can still go through this pretty quickly and efficiently, just by remembering the rules and the GCF and all that. So this is in descending order. The GCF is 1. So then since the GCF is 1, I'm going to go directly to 2 binomials. Okay? So the GCF is 1. I'm going to go directly to 2 binomials. Now let's look at 4z squared. Okay, so remember FOIL. We're doing the same thing we've been doing. So let's do the F first. Give me 2 factors whose product is 4. It's 4z squared, but let's just look at 4 for right now. So I know that 4 times 1 is 4, and I know that 2 times 2 is 4, right? So that's the only possibilities for 4. Okay? So what I would do, and it does not always work, but what I would do is I would choose the 2 numbers that are close together on the number line. So 2 and 2 are the same numbers. I would use those first. If that doesn't work, I'll try 4 and 1. So hence the idea of trial and error. Okay? So let's put 2z and 2z. So make sure you use your correct variables, though. Don't say x when this is z. All right, now, so that takes care of math. Y'all agree that so far I'm good? Because 2z times 2z is 4z squared. Now let's go to the last, 49. The possibilities of 49 are 49 and 1, 7 and 7. So what do you want to try? Let's do 7 and 7. Now, sometimes it's obvious that certain numbers are not going to work, because, for example, 49 and 1, you know 49 is not going to work because that's a big number compared to this middle term. All right, so let's try 7 and 7. So let's put 7 here, 7 here. Okay? Now look at the last sign. The last sign is positive. So what does that mean about these signs in here? So remember, you're looking at L. So that means that this number times this number must be a positive 49. In order for this to be a positive 49, that means that these signs in here have to be the same. And it's going to be this middle sign. So they're both going to be negative. Okay? Now, so far my L is okay, right? So here's the thought process. That's what you're going to go through. Now let's do the out and the inner. Because remember, I checked this, but I still need to make sure I get that negative 28z. So let's do the outer. The outer, 2z times negative 7 is a negative 14z. The inner, negative 7 times 2z is a negative 14z. And look at what happens. When I add these up, negative 14z and a negative 14z, I get a negative 28z, which is what you wanted. So hey, this was not that bad, right? That wasn't that difficult. So then the answer, you're going to say 2z minus 7 times 2z minus 7, or you can write this as 2z minus 7 squared. Okay? All right, so that's number 5. Let's get number 6. Number 6, let's suppose we had this in number 6. Suppose we had 6x squared plus 53x minus 38. So 6x squared plus 53x minus 38. All right, so this is a bummer, right? Because 6 is not prime, and the absolute value of negative 38, which is 38, and that's not prime. So, and then that 38 is not a small number in comparison to some of the others we dealt with. And then, hey, there's that 53 I have to deal with as well. It is okay. We can deal with this. So look for the GCF first. First of all, this is in descending order, so that's a good thing. Now let's look at the GCF. The GCF of 6, 53, and 38 is 1. So now that means I'm going to factor this as 2 binomials. Okay? All right, now let's look at the first. Remember, notice in every problem I'm doing, I'm writing FOIL. I'm writing the word FOIL. And I'm thinking about each little part as I go along. So I do this first, I do this next, and then I look at this last. Okay? At the end, this is what I look at, the out and the inner. Okay, so let's look at 6. So there's 2 possibilities for 6. 6 times 1, 3 times 2, correct? So what do you want to try first? Yeah, I would try in 3 and 2 first. May not work. It may be that 6 and 1 is what I need to use, but let's just try 3 and 2 first. So we're going to say 3x and 2x. Now remember, you could have put 2x here. Does not matter. Okay, now let's look at the last. Now, we see how this is negative. What does that mean about these signs in here? That means the signs in here are what? Different. So if you want to, I remember trial and error. If it doesn't work, you'll try something else. And so if you want to, you can make this positive, this negative right away and see what happens. Okay? All right, now let's look at 38. There are several possibilities for 38. So let's think about that. So 2 times, since 38's even, I know that 38 is divisible by 2. Now what I would do is, using a calculator if you need to, so I'm going to take the calculator out. Just use your calculator to help you with this. So 38, notice what I'm doing. 38 divided by 2 is 19, right? That means that 2 times 19 are factors of 38. So which means that 2 times 19 is 38. Now let's try, in fact, that would probably be, because 2's prime, 19's prime, so the only other possibility then is 38 and 1, right? Because 2's prime, 19's prime. So those are the only possibilities. Okay, so that's not that bad. So let's look at 2 and 19. Let's try that first. So listen carefully. So 2 and 19. So I'm going to ask you this. Always think about this. Are you going to put the 2 here? No, because if you put the 2 here, then that means I can factor out a 2, right? Which meant that every term is divisible by 2, which would make the GCF no longer 1, which GCF is 1. So I know I cannot put the 2 there. So if I'm going to use 2 and 19, then that means then I will need to put the 2 here and 19 here. Okay? All right, now let's go and check F and L. So 3x times 2x is 6x squared. L, a positive 2 times a negative 19 is a negative 38. Now let's do the on to enter, because I need to check to make sure I get that positive 53. Use your calculator if you need to. So 3x times negative 19 will be a negative 19 times 3. 19 times 3 is 57. So that's a negative 57x, right? The inner, 2 times 2x is 4x. And when I add these up, a negative 57x and a positive 4x, that's a negative 53x. But that's not what I wanted. But what do you notice about those two numbers? They're opposites. So all that means is you just change the signs. So I'm going to get 3x minus 2 times 2x plus 19. Okay? And then again, even before you go on, there's no reason for you to miss these items. Factoring is not that difficult because you can always check. Go back and check. So 3x times 2x is 6x squared. A negative 2 times 19 is a negative 38. So now my F and L are okay. I'll do the outer and the inner. The outer is now 57x, and the inner is negative 4x. And when I add them up, I get a positive 53x. And so there's my answer. So your answer, you're going to say 3x minus 2 times 2x plus 19, or 2x plus 19 times 3x minus 2. Okay? Now be careful when you put, just mention this, be careful when you put these in My Math Lab, because the symbols are important. So some students forget one of these symbols right here, one of these parentheses, and they get the answer wrong, even though on paper they had it correct. So just be careful. Be careful when you transfer this back into My Math Lab. Okay, let's look at number 7. So number 7, let's suppose we have this. Okay, so number 7, let's suppose this is number 7. We have 7x squared plus 40x minus 12. So 7x squared plus 40x minus 12. Okay, so 7 is prime, so that's a good thing. The absolute value of negative 12 is 12, and 12 is not prime, but I can deal with that. All right. Notice again the last sign's negative, so it means the signs in your factors will be different. Okay, first of all, let's look for the GCF. GCF of those three terms is 1. So once you know the GCF is 1, go directly to the two binomials. Go directly to that. And then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to write out FOIL. so that you can go through your thinking process. So if you write this out, it forces you to go through the thought processes properly. So we're going to do F first. We'll do this one first. So give me two factors whose product is 7x squared. Since 7's prime, there's only one possibility, 7 and 1. So let's put 7x here, x here. Okay, now let's go to L. So that's negative 12. So I know that since that last term, since my constant term is negative, I know that my signs are different. One's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. So go ahead and do that now. Make one positive, one negative. It doesn't work, just like we did here. Remember how we put one positive, one negative, and then we saw that those were opposites. All I did was change the signs. All right, so no big deal. Trial and error. Okay, now let's think about 12. There are several possibilities for 12. 12 times 1, 2 times 6, 4 times 3, right? And I think that's about it. So those are the only possibilities for 12. Now, of those three pairs, what do you want to try? All right, you want to try 4 and 3 since those are close together, the number line. It may not work. It may be that 12 and 1 works. It may be that 3 and 6 works. All right, let's try 4 and 3 and see what happens. So think about, so start being strategic with this. Think about where you can put the 4 and the 3. You see how you want that 40x right here? So you want this to be 40x. So that means you want the outer and the inner to add up to be 40x, right? So that means probably you may want to put the 4 here to get this to be bigger than the other one, and the 3 here. But you still know that hey, something's wrong here. That's not going to work, right? That's not going to work. Because if I go now to the outer and the inner, look at the outer. That's a negative 28x, because 7x times negative 4 is negative 28x. And that's a positive 3x. I'm going to add that up. I get a negative 25x, which is way under what I want. So that probably means that I'm not going to use 4 and 3. So let's just try something else then. Let's try 2 and 6. Let's try 2 and 6. All right, so let's go back and put 7x and x, and let's try 2 and 6. So remember, one's positive, one's negative. It may be that this is going to be the negative, this is going to be a positive. Doesn't matter, trial and error. So we're trying 2 and 6. So let's put the 6 here, the 2 there, and see what happens. Okay? If it doesn't work, we will switch those numbers. Okay, so if so go back to the FOIL here. So 7x times x is 7x squared. A positive 2 times a negative 6 is negative 12. So this looks good so far. Now let's do the outer and inner, because remember you want to get a 40x. So the outer, 7x times negative 6 is a negative 42x. The inner is 2x. When I add them up, I get a negative 40x, which is not what I wanted, but those are opposites. So that means all I do is change the signs. So that's not going to work. But I know what is going to work will be this. So what's going to work now will be instead of saying 7x plus 2, we're going to say 7x minus 2. Instead of saying x minus 6, I'm going to say x plus 6. And again, check before you go on. So you know the F and the L are okay. Now let's do the outer and inner. So my outer is now 42x. My inner is now negative 2x. And when I add them up, I get 40x, which is what you wanted. So the answer will be 7x minus 2 times x plus 6, or x plus 6 times 7x minus 2. Okay? All right, let's look at number 8. We're going to do one more. Number 8. So let's say number 8, I had this. 10x squared minus 11x minus 6. So 10x squared minus 11x minus 6. Okay, so now it's a little bit more difficult, right? Because 10 is not prime, and the absolute value of negative 6 is 6, and 6 is not prime as well. So that's going to be a little bit more challenging, but it's doable. You know how to deal with this. Okay, so notice the GCF is 1. So once you know the GCF is 1, we can go directly to 2 binomials, factoring it as 2 binomials. Now let's look at 10x. So 10x squared. So there are several possibilities, actually 2 possibilities for 10x. 10 and 1 5 and 2. So of 10 and 1 and 5 and 2, what do you want to try first? You want to try 5 and 2. So remember, FOIL is what you're going to be thinking about. So let's put this as 5x and this as 2x, right? Okay. Now, let's go to the, so far my F is okay. Now let's go to L. So your L is -6, right? Your L is -6. Since that's last sign's negative, that means your signs in here are different. So let's say plus, minus. It may have to be 5x minus and then 2x plus. I don't know. We're going to do the trial and error and see what happens. So let's look at 6 though. What are the possibilities for 6? Well, there's 3 and 2, 6 and 1. What do you want to try? You want to try 3 and 2, you want to try 6 and 1. And then start being strategic. Look at your middle term. I need to get that -11x, right? So let's think what might work. Do you think 3 and 2 would work? Or do you think 6 and 1 would work? I don't know, let's try 3 and 2. If you tried 3 and 2, are you going to put the 2 here? No, because if you put the 2 here, remember you can factor out a 2, right? Which meant that Gcf is not 1, and it is 1. So it also means, guys, that every term is divisible by 2. The only, notice that these terms are, but this is not. That's -11x. That's not divisible by 2. Okay, so remember, when I say divisible, I mean that when I divide by 2, I get a remainder 0. Okay, so that means that if I'm going to use 3 and 2, that means I'm going to have to put the 2 here and the 3 there. Okay? All right, now, don't say that's your answer without checking. It is so easy to get all these correct because you can always check your work. So let's go to L. A +2 times a -3 is a -6. Now, all I have to do is check to make sure I get that middle term, and that's your outer and your inner. Your outer and your inner. So my outer is -15x, because 5x times -3 is -15x. My inner is 4x, and when I add them up, I get -11x. Hey, I got my answer right away. That's your answer. So the answer then would be 5x plus 2 times 2x minus 3, or you can say 2x minus 3 times 5x plus 2. Okay? All right, so we've done 8 problems, and the thing I want you to get from here is the thought processes as we go through this. So trial and error, and think about, always remember, because remember, you always want to make sure that your factors are prime. 2x minus 3, the Gcf is 1. 5x plus 2, the Gcf is 1. So when we put the 2 here, remember we put the 2? I asked you, can I factor out anything here? If we put the 2, and the answer was yes, because I could take out a 2, which meant that the Gcf is no longer 1, and it is 1. Okay? All right, so think about all of this. So this is, we did 8 problems. I'm going to do the next part, which is going to probably contain about 6 problems. So that should give you enough of examples to kind of get you through your assignments. So as the end of this lesson. And this lesson was on factoring trinomials where the leading coefficient is not 1. And we did this trial and error FOIL.